Detective James Dobbins and his wife Elaine are tired and hungry after a 12-hour road trip.
Hey, come on in, guys. Want to sit here? Is all right?
He was a police officer in Texas. Destination theoretically was Denver so that he could apply for a new job as an officer there.
They were in there eating. But then he heard a gunshot.
Get down!
You okay? All right, we gotta stay down.
And he, cop instinct, made sure that everybody was down. And then stood up and ran out to see what was up.
Dobbins is relieved to see there's already an officer on scene.
Officer! I'm fellow police! Officer, can I help?
He saw a cruiser, but he couldn't figure out where the cop that went with it was. So he went around and he could see the cop just bleeding out.
Come on. Hang in there, buddy. I'm gonna get you some help. Officer down. Car 83. Officer down.
Across town, Joe Kenda is about to be called to the scene of yet another shooting, but in a new role, sans his usual suit and tie.
In 1980, I was moved from homicide to patrol division and was promoted to the rank of sergeant. I would have a team of 8 officers who worked for me, and on December the 6th, 1982, I was working on the northwest side of the city.
Dispatch all cars, officer down. Car 83, officer down.
The radio exploded with activity. Everybody knows what officer down means. The greatest fear, the absolute greatest fear. Somebody's taken one of your own.
And Car 83 holds special significance for Kenda.
Just don't look too close.
I was aware that Mark Dabling was assigned that car because Dabling worked for me.
Becomes a problem later on.
He's a member of the team, myself and 8 sworn officers in uniform. He's one of us. He is all of us.
My heart sunk when first I heard an officer was shot, and then when I realized it was Mark, it was difficult.
It's shocking when it's a friend of yours. It's even more so, but you have a job to do. It was hard to continue to have to answer other calls for service and not knowing.
Kenda is halfway to the scene when he gets another call. It seems the top brass have other plans for him.
Dispatch 4.1. 4.1, do you copy?
That was my radio call sign.
Go for 4.1.
4.1, you are directed to proceed to Penrose Main Hospital. Meet the ambulance and assist the family members.
4.1, roger that.
That pained me greatly. I am chafing at the bit to be part of this investigation. I'm not in the homicide division. I did as instructed. I was determined to do the appropriate thing for the family as best I could.
As Kenda changes course and heads to the hospital, patrol officers at the scene are surrounding Officer Mark Dabling's cruiser.
When I got on the scene, we had an influx of officers and detectives that showed up to help.
So what do we have so far?
Not much. Before the call came in, Officer Devlin had made a traffic stop.
Mark Dabling was conducting routine patrol, announced he was making a traffic contact.
83, 1025.
I would doubt that Mark Dabling thought anything of stopping somebody for an illegal left turn.
So whoever was in the car shot him.
It seems that way. At any rate, at this time, it's the hospital with a single gunshot wound to the back.
How bad is it?
It's very bad.
Not far away, Sergeant Kenda is bracing himself for a difficult assignment.
Doctor, I'm here for the wounded officer.
They should be here any minute. Stop!
It's not a stranger. Not somebody I don't know. It's somebody who works for me and somebody I know well. It is a sinking feeling in your stomach. It's absolutely beyond awful. Penrose, Maine generally is very quiet. This night, the emergency room is chaos. People are asking everybody, how's the officer, how's the officer? My first job getting here was to try to bring some level of control to this. The first step was to throw the press out.
I'm sorry, folks, but we need some privacy. We'll give you an interview as soon as possible. If I can ask you to step out. Thank you.
And they left. That eliminated one crowd. The officers were there. I said, ladies and gentlemen, I understand you're upset. So am I. This is not the moment.
Mark's mother and girlfriend will be here any minute. I need you to keep it together for him. Be strong for him. Help me here, please.
Yes, sir. And they complied.
Can you two keep an eye on the press, make sure they don't come back in here? Let them know a public information officer will be in here soon. And all these civilians, can you get their names, find out why they're here, and if they're here for Mark, can you find out how they heard about the shooting? Thanks.
So we got everybody doing something. We had taken chaos and reduced it to a little more manageable situation.
Sir, are you the one in charge here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. The doctor asked me to let you know that unfortunately you didn't make it.
It was then I knew he was no longer with us.
Thank you. I'll let everyone know I just need a moment.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Mark Demling was an excellent officer, a very nice fellow. He was 30 years old. Everybody was friends with Mark Demling.
Liked hiking, liked the outdoors. He was a history buff. He had a passion for police work. He was a mentor of mine.
I had a lot of respect for him. He was fair. He was honest. I mean, he could have been the poster boy for a CSPD recruiting ad.
I went and took a quick look at Mark, just a quick look. I couldn't deal with more than a quick look. I couldn't.
A fellow cop murdered in the line of duty. And at this point, there's nothing Kenda can do about it.
You want to do anything and everything you can to be part of the capture, part of the resolution of this nightmare that is eating away at you because in your heart you know it could be you. And yet I knew I couldn't be part of that investigation, and I wouldn't be.
Word of Dabling's death spreads quickly through the ranks of city officials. And soon a member of the district attorney's office arrives at the crime scene. An investigator named Larry Martin.
So what do we got? I got a call from one of my co-workers who advised me that this had happened. Well, Mark was a friend of mine, and I knew right then that I wanted to be on this case.
Detective David Spencer shows Martin around.
Mark was making a traffic stop. He gets out of his car. The odd thing is the angle of the shooter.
It was obvious that it wasn't a typical traffic stop. Mark's car was parked in an odd angle, which put Mark at an immediate disadvantage.
Shooter comes up with a gun. Mark sees it, goes for cover, gets shot in the back.
He was like a sitting duck.
Yeah. So the bullet that killed him did that. There's traces of blood along the edges.
The bullet had traveled from his back through his chest and actually had gone through that street sign. The crime scene investigators found a bullet casing from a .44 Magnum So you know then that you're dealing with a very high-powered rifle.
I want to let Kenda know. Martin and Kenda. Yeah, what you got, Larry?
Because of the fact that Dabbling worked for me, I stayed abreast of the facts of the case. As referred to me by Larry Martin, he would tell me what was going on.
I thought you'd be interested to know that...
Turned out the murder weapon was a 44 Magnum.
The 44 Magnum carbine is a very unusual weapon. It is incredibly powerful.
I doubt this guy just happened to be carrying that kind of firepower around.
He must have already been up to no good when Mark pulled him over.
I think you're right. But what?
To help answer that question, detectives begin interviewing patrons from the restaurant adjacent to the crime scene. One man in particular has a lot of information.
Brett Carlson was the manager that night, and during the course of business, he did notice that a police officer was pulling somebody over out in front of his store.
Well, I saw the flashing lights, looked over for a sec. I figured no big deal, some guy in a Camaro was getting a ticket. So I went back to what I was doing.
But then all of a sudden, he hears 3 gunshots ring out.
Get down! Everyone, get down!
He sees a suspect leaning out the passenger side window of this Camaro with some type of a long gun. He then saw the suspect get back into the driver's seat of that Camaro and speed away.
It is obvious from my own experience, the suspect clearly understood that Dabbling was about to discover who he was.
Who is this guy? Is there something in that car he didn't want Mark to see?
This is a guy that needs to escape and will kill if necessary to get done.
Did you get a good look at who was in the car?
Well, just one guy, white guy. Had brown hair, maybe in his 20s.
Pretty nondescript. You know, he couldn't tell any weight or height because he was still inside the car.
However, Brett Carlson is able to provide a detailed description of the shooter's vehicle, a red Camaro with California tags. Surprisingly, Carlson is also able to recall the vehicle's license plate number.
The police dispatchers immediately aired the description of the stopped vehicle with a license plate number.
This was definitely an all-out manhunt.
Every officer in the city drops what he's doing and starts looking for that car. We're going to put this guy to ground, and nothing else matters. This guy has kicked over a hornet's nest. We've been working very hard as an agency to deal with this terrible event of the death of an officer.
Mark Dabbling was a wonderful guy, always had a smile on his face.
Mark was special. He understood what it means to help people. Mark understood community policing before community policing was in vogue.
While police scour the city in search of the vehicle, Lt.Joe Kenda is at the hospital, handling an emotionally grueling aspect of the case.
Mark Dabbling was not married, but he did have a girlfriend, and he had a mother. They responded to the hospital. I was there to meet them.
Mrs. Dabbling?
Yes.
I'm Joe Kenda, Mark's supervising officer. I'm very sorry, but Mark didn't make it.
No.
And they broke down into an emotional mess.
I'll get the chaplain for you.
I took an oath to do what I said I would do. I'm not going to back away from that. But I was suffering that night. I still do.
Meanwhile, the search for the shooter continues.
The entire police department is in pursuit of this car. Within minutes, they discover the car parked in a driveway of a private home in the area of the shooting. Now, we're going to make contact in this house.
You
You're just not going to go up and knock on the door and say, hey, can we talk? You're looking for a cop killer.
They didn't take any chances.
Police, open up!
So you know right away, well, this isn't the guy we're looking for.
Yes, sir. Is that your vehicle over there?
No, I've never seen it before.
Okay. Would you mind if we come in and look around?
Sure.
They went in, they searched that house. Well, he wasn't there.
Clear.
The homeowner turns out to be very cooperative. He's home alone with his wife. He's watching television. Somebody dumps a car in his driveway and walks away from it. He has no idea who did that.
And with only Brett Carlson's vague description of the shooter to go on, neither do the cops.
Well, right away, what you want to do is get the crime scene investigators over there to completely investigate this car.
The vehicle identification number should tell investigators who actually owns the car, and a latent fingerprint might tell them who's been driving it.
Technicians did find a very good identifiable fingerprint on the rearview mirror. We sent it to the lab.
Let's find out if it matches, but at the end of the day, that's going to take hours, days, who knows. We need something right now.
They opened the trunk and they realized that it had many license plates from many states.
You got a pretty good idea of what's going on now. You got somebody that's traveling through numerous states and continuing to steal license plates to cover up the fact that he's in a stolen car.
What's this?
Like the trail of breadcrumbs.
They find a motel receipt from the state of Nebraska in this car. Going to a motel, you need to show ID.
So we called the authorities in Nebraska.
Hi, can I help you?
Yes, ma'am.
They go to that motel and do whatever they had to do to get the records on who this guy was. And they do it right now.
Let's see here. Here we go. He was under the name Joe Harbor.
Joe Harbor.
I tell you what, when I got here this afternoon, he left without even paying his bill.
That figures. Could you show me the room? Nobody's been in here, have they?
No, maids come in the morning.
Okay.
They reported to us that unusual things were found in there. Lots of road maps. And there was also several magazines.
Wow, all empty.
So now we're looking for Joe Harbor. Who is Joe Harbor?
Back in Colorado Springs, investigators run the name through a national database. There are plenty of Joseph Harbors out there, but none with the type of criminal record normally associated with a cop killer.
You know you have a guy that's stealing license plates to cover up the identity of a stolen car. Is Joe Harbor really his name? Probably not.
He's running from something. We don't know what, but he's running. We still don't know who he is.
Hey, dispatcher with Colorado Springs, can you run a VIN for me?
This Camaro is in NCIC, National Crime Information Center, as a stolen car. It was stolen 30 days ago in yet another state.
Down! Get out! Get the down! Get out! Where are they? What? The keys to the Camaro!
They're over there!
All right.
Keith Clark was the owner of this Camaro. He lived in Indianapolis.
He was robbed at gunpoint by two individuals, both white males, who tied him up, stole the car, and had a discussion about killing him.
So steal him right now. He's already seen us.
They're already gonna know it's us.
They debated whether or not to kill him before they stole his car. The part I can't figure out is why they didn't.
You guys don't have. We don't need to make this messier than it is. Let's go.
Today's your lucky day, big boy.
He lucked out.
When Larry Martin briefs Kenda about this new intel,
Go for Kenda.
he is intrigued to learn there was not one, but two individuals involved in the home invasion.
Are you sure there's only one guy in the Camaro when Mark got shot?
Yep, every witness said one guy. Huh, so up until about a month ago.
This guy had a partner in crime.
Are we looking for two people now, not just one?
Who are these people? Who are these people?
But they're not local boys, I can tell you that.
I'm afraid if we don't find them soon, they just disappear.
I know.
But the Colorado Springs PD hasn't played their last card. CSI has a match for the fingerprint found in the killer's stolen Camaro. And it's not Joe Harbor.
They've identified him. He's Vernon Wayne Templeman. He's 24 years old, and he has an enormous police record. We are in pursuit of him. And it will not stop until we find him. There's something profoundly wrong about a policeman being killed in the line of duty. There just is. When you put that uniform on, you walk out the door, you may never walk through it again. That's the nature of the work. When Dabbling is shot on December 6, 1982, that all wells up in you. It's overwhelming. Absolutely overwhelming.
Colorado Springs police are determined to catch the killer, and a fingerprint collected from the shooter's abandoned Camaro may bring them one step closer to that goal.
Will you run, Vernon Wayne Templeman? Who is this guy? Does he have a record?
He is basically a one-man crime wave. He's an escapee from a jail in Florida.
Contact was made with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department in Florida, and they advised that Vernon Wayne Templeman and a person by the name of Larry Bailey both escaped from the Pinellas County Jail just a month before Officer Mark Dabbling was murdered.
They obtained hacksaw blades from the Confederates. They saw through 20-some bars in this jail.
They were able to leave their jail cell, get up on the roof of the jail, climb down the side of the jail, stole a car, and were on a run. Looking at that route that they would have taken to go all the way from Florida and end up in Colorado, and you're finding lots and lots of robberies of motels, liquor stores, and even a couple of banks.
Check your hardware, man.
Did these two people do this?
So how do you want to do it?
More than likely.
As investigators try to retrace the path Templeman and Bailey might have taken on their crime spree, they catch a much-needed break.
Oh, really? Well, thank you. Lawrence Bailey's been shot. He's in custody.
Where?
Sacramento, California.
Nice. He's paralyzed from the waist down, and he wants to talk to someone about Templeman, which would make me wonder, maybe he has a grudge.
They ain't no honor among thieves. No, it's not a nice group of people.
So myself and Detective David Spencer hopped on a plane and went to California.
We found him in the medical prison facility, and he was in real rough shape.
We hear that you're friends with Templeman.
No, I wouldn't really call Vernon a friend. Because after I got shot, he left me to die. I mean, look at me. So if you have any questions about him, I'll try and help you out as much as possible.
Bailey tells Martin that he escaped with Templeman, as we already knew.
After we got out of jail, you know, we stole a car. And we needed money, right?
They conducted a series of robberies across the United States, liquor stores, motels, at gunpoint.
they stole license plates from Georgia all the way to California and back.
Vernon started to get paranoid. Said that the car in Florida that we took, police were on the lookout for it, so we needed to ditch it.
Ended up in Indianapolis and saw this really nice Camaro parked there. And Templeman decided then that that's the car I want.
Go.
Continued on a crime spree, robbing liquor stores and motels.
And in Sacramento, they decided to pull another armed robbery.
Good. Templeman's going to be the driver.
Yeah.
Beta's going to go in and rob this mom and pop hotel.
Go.
Larry went in, he had a 22 with him. She confronted the clerk.
Give me your money.
Give it up, I'm not shooting!
Unbeknownst to them, there's a surveillance camera.
You think I'm f***ing around with you? Hurry!
The owner is watching them.
Hurry! You money! Hold on!
Call 911.
Run! Run!
He was hoping that Templeman would come in to help him, but that didn't happen.
And so Larry was A, going back to prison, B, he was never going to walk again, and C, he was furious.
We're looking for your boy, Temple. We believe that he killed a Colorado Springs police officer.
You know where we can find him?
No. I'll tell you what, if you do find him, I'll testify against him. He said that he would kill a cop before he went back to jail. Hell, we even practiced what we would do if we were pulled over by a cop.
We used to practice how to kill a policeman. How nice.
Templeman told him that, you know, when a cop stops you, he has no idea who he's got. He's just stopping a car. That's the time to get the drop on him.
What you're saying is that if he gets behind you...
They had discussed that they would park in such a way that put the law enforcement officer at a disadvantage.
He doesn't have you covered. He doesn't have a shot on you, and he's in the dark.
Prison is gladiator school. You learn how to sharpen your skills as a bad guy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Lawrence Bailey's statement is further confirmation Vernon Templeman is the man who shot Officer Dabbling. But back in Colorado Springs, the case is about to take another dramatic turn.
What?
911 gets a call from a frantic woman who was confronted at gunpoint.
They stole my car keys. They stole my car.
She had answered a knock on her door, and when she opened it, a young white male rushed in, slapped her around, tied her up, and stole her car.
No, send help. Right away. Please.
The police put two and two together in 5 seconds. That's Templeman.
Though Vernon Templeman has successfully stolen another vehicle, this time Kenda's men already know the make, model, and plates. They also know the driver is more than willing to kill another cop.
We immediately put the description of that vehicle out on the police radio, not only in Colorado Springs, but throughout El Paso County.
Every officer wants to be the one that finds it. Everybody wants to be the one that faces him down. Put your .44 Magnum carbine on me, you and let's see what happens. Information is coming to our hands from a woman that puts this shooter in a new vehicle, but we know what it is. And we are in hot pursuit of that car.
In a situation like this, it was going to be everybody at the same task, not only here, but in every neighboring state.
There was a police officer down in Fountain, Colorado, just about 12 miles south of Colorado Springs, who wanted to be involved.
All cars be on the lookout for a metallic blue Pontiac Granville.
When this went out over the police frequency, Officer Danny Weaver went to Interstate 25 and parked and waited on the chance that maybe the suspect would be heading south in that direction.
He immediately got behind that car, verified that the license plate matched.
John 7, I'm behind the 62 suspect.
He called them in. I need backup. I'm behind that stolen car that's wanted in connection with the police officer murder in Colorado Springs, and I need some help.
Officer Weaver knew who he was stopping. He took all the precautions he possibly could.
He doesn't put any lights on that car till other cars arrive.
Within a matter of minutes, a slew of other officers have joined Officer Weaver in his pursuit of Vernon Templeman.
All right, I'm going to initiate.
So you got that adrenaline running through your system as this is coming to a head.
This is the felony stop to end all felony stops.
This is it. Is he going to jump out of that car and start shooting?
Every police officer in that moment isn't frightened. He's enraged. Give me an excuse to light you up. Give me an excuse.
Drop. Put your hands out the window.
Mr. Badass does as he's told.
Step out of the car and keep your head wing sealed.
Mr. I'm not going to be taken alive till he's faced with the choice. That's a little different.
He gave up like the coward he was, laid down on the ground like he was told, and was taken into custody.
Attention all cars. The suspect in Officer Davlin's shooting has been apprehended without incident.
I felt relief. I felt a rush come over me of satisfaction that he's not going to shoot anybody else. He's done. We didn't gun him down in a fit of rage, which we could have done. Because if we kill someone because we're mad, because we hate him, because he's killed one of us, then we are like him, and we are not like him.
Back at headquarters, police gather to see what Vernon Templeman has to say for himself.
Put your feet flat on the floor. Sit up.
I know the game, and I know how it's played. They will attempt to talk to him. I knew he wouldn't say a word. He'd want a lawyer. He's an experienced bad guy.
We already know a lot that's happened, but I want your side of the story.
I'll tell my side of the story. I'm telling it to my lawyer.
That is your right. But there is one thing we're going to have to get straightened out.
Okay, we're not going to interrogate you anymore, but we do have a right to know who you really are.
See, I can send public defenders to your cell. I got to give them a name. We don't know what that is.
Joseph Harbor.
We know it's not Joe Harbor.
We knew who he was, and we had him by the throat. Vernon is toast, whether he thinks so or not. Mr. Templeman gives a fake name upon being arrested. He can tell a story. He can even invent one, and it won't make any difference. There is a volume of evidence that says he's the killer.
What's more, investigators know the man before them is already a fugitive from justice.
We know that's a fake name.
Templeman, you're done.
He asked me, "You're going to take my fingerprints?" And I said, "Well, of course we're going to take your fingerprints."
We pretty much told him, we know that you're wanted, We know everything about you. Don't kid us anymore. So he gave it up that he was really burning Wayne Templeman.
Let me be honest with you, okay? Cooperation is the only thing that's gonna help you.
Listen, you have a right to talk to an attorney, but we want to hear your side of the story.
I'm not saying jack. So why don't you be a good little piggy? Go fetch my lawyer.
Templeman, you gotta fry.
As Vernon Templeman waits for a court-appointed attorney to arrive, Kenda and his fellow investigators try to piece together the events that led to Officer Dabling's death.
Mark Dabling was conducting routine patrol.
83, 1025.
Well, he sees this Camaro come up and make a left-hand turn. You can't do that here. So he calls it in. He's making a traffic stop.
I got a red Camaro, California plates.
As police officers, we know there's no such thing as a routine traffic stop. And Mark's case is a prime example of that.
You stop a car. You have no idea who's in that car. But that person in that car certainly knows who you are. You are the police. The suspect clearly understood that Dabling was about to discover who he was. He's an escapee from a prison. He's not about to be taken.
Before he even made contact with Templeman, Templeman was executing the plan that he had talked about with Larry Bailey.
Templeman had parked his car cockeyed, which put Mark at an immediate disadvantage because he had to go around behind his vehicle to approach the passenger side of the suspect vehicle.
He got out of his car. He advanced toward the car he had stopped.
But at the same time, Templeman slid from the driver's side over to the passenger side. And was leaning out the window with that .44 Magnum. He needed to dive for cover. He turned and was running down the side of his car to get to cover when Templeman started shooting.
He basically didn't have a chance.
He shot Dabling once in the back. It struck a vital organ in Mark Dabling.
Vernon Templeman is charged with first-degree murder and held without bond until trial.
Larry and I, at that point, had a big, huge job in front of us. I think it was later, when it was all over, is when we allowed ourselves to grieve.
On a cold December morning, over 500 police officers gather for the funeral of Mark Dabling.
Any police funeral's hard. This was incredibly hard because I knew Mark, respected Mark. He was a great cop, good guy.
Mark gave his life for this community, and I know that he made a conscious decision that he would lay down his life before he would risk the lives of innocent bystanders.
I was very proud of the way the Colorado Springs Police Department took care of Mark's family.
The department's highest honor, the Police Cross, was awarded posthumously to Dabling's parents. It's only the second such honor for an officer killed on duty.
Police officers' funerals are a big event because it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood. At the end of the day, police officers believe they have each other. And in many ways, that's true.
Since Mark's death, we remember December 6th every year. You think about it. We never forgot.
Policemen don't forget. Never.
Vernon Templeman is found guilty of first-degree murder and is sentenced to life in prison. Although justice has been served, the community is still deeply affected by the loss of Mark Dabling. A street is dedicated in his honor.
The city responded like they'd lost their firstborn son. The amount of support we got was just incredible.
I want Mark to be remembered as one heck of a police officer. A great guy, a great friend.
Mark's mom said, you know, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what might have been. I spend some time thinking that he is probably in a wonderful place. That makes me happy.
In my time on the PD, I buried 7 friends of mine who went down in the line. Did people remember? Some do. Some never forget. They're on the wall. They chose to be on that wall. I was there with them. I'd go back tomorrow. But it's young men escape, and I'm no longer young.
The first thing they noticed was the silence, wrong for a New York summer night, wrong for a block that never truly sleeps. Like the city itself had held its breath and forgotten how to exhale, and in that quiet there was a shape on the sidewalk that didn't belong, a dark outline under a street lamp with a halo of buzzing moths, a woman's shoe kicked off at an angle that looked almost staged, as if someone had placed it there to point like an arrow at the truth and then walked away smiling. At 2:17 a.m., a taxi rolled through without slowing, tires whispering over asphalt still warm from the day, and the driver's eyes flicked once, twice, and then stayed forward, because in New York you learn to keep moving. You learn that staring can turn you into the next headline. But the headline came anyway. It came with a name. It came with a date. And it came with a wound that time would not close. Her name was Lila Hartman, 26, bright, sharp, the kind of woman who walked like she had somewhere important to be even when she didn't. She lived in a narrow walk-up on the edge of the village, 3rd floor, windows that rattled when the subway growled underfoot, a cheap brass lock that sometimes stuck if you didn't lift the handle just right. She was a copy editor at a small magazine that liked to pretend it was bigger than it was, the type of place where people drank bad coffee and talked like every sentence might be quoted someday. She had a laugh that carried, friends said. A laugh you could follow through a crowd. And on the evening she vanished into the city's jaws, she left that laugh behind in a bar thick with cigarette smoke and neon, a place where the music was too loud and the stories were louder. It was June of 1987, when New York was still rough around the edges, when the streetlights buzzed and the alleyways felt like mouths, when the headlines were a daily drumbeat of blood and bravado. Lila had met a friend, Marcy, hair sprayed high, lipstick the color of fresh bruises, after work. 1 drink became 2. 2 became a late-night hunger, the greasy comfort of a slice folded in half, dripping oil onto a napkin. They talked about deadlines, about boyfriends, about the future like it was a thing you could schedule. Around midnight, Marcy peeled off toward the subway. Lila stayed. She said she wanted to walk. She said the night air felt good. She said she'd be fine. That's the last clean fact anyone can hold up like a badge. After that, everything becomes fog. A shadow. A rumor. A memory that changes shape each time it's told. At 12:41 a.m., a bouncer outside the bar watched her step into the flow of the street, the hem of her jacket catching the light. He remembered because she paused, just a second, as if listening, head tilted, eyes scanning, not scared exactly, but alert, the way you are when you sense a presence behind you. He couldn't say if someone was there. He couldn't say if she was alone. He just remembered the pause. The stillness. And then she was gone, swallowed by the city's endless corridors. At 1:03 a.m., a man walking his dog reported hearing a short, sharp scream somewhere between the cross streets, one of those sounds that lances through your spine before your brain catches up. He looked around. He saw nothing. The dog pulled forward, eager to get home. The man told himself it was laughter, it was drunkenness, it was New York being New York. He didn't call the police until morning, and by then the scream had already dried into something useless, something that couldn't be tested or bagged or traced. At 2:17 a.m., a patrol car made its pass and found her. Lila wasn't in an alley. She wasn't hidden. She was right there on the sidewalk, near a row of trash bags that glistened like wet animals. Her face was turned toward the street lamp, eyes half open, as if she tried to look up at something towering over her in the final seconds. There was blood, but not the Hollywood kind. Real blood. Dark, sticky, already cooling. A single stab wound beneath the ribs. A clean entry. A cruel, precise act. No purse. No wallet. One earring missing. The other still clinging to her lobe like a tiny silver tear. The scene didn't shout. It whispered. And that whisper made the detectives uneasy, because chaos is easier to understand than control. They cordoned off the block. Yellow tape snapping in the breeze. Flashbulbs popping from a few night crawlers, who seemed to materialize the moment tragedy hit pavement. A detective, Raymond Kessler, thick mustache, tired eyes, stood over the body with his hands on his hips, staring at the shoe, the missing purse, the neatness of the wound. Robbery, someone muttered. Kessler didn't answer. He'd seen robberies. He'd seen panic stabs, wild, messy, desperate. This wasn't that. This felt like a decision. They canvassed. They questioned. They knocked on doors that opened only a crack, chains still latched, eyes blinking through the gap. Did you hear anything? Did you see anyone? A man? A woman? A car? Someone running? Most answers were no. Or maybe. Or I don't want trouble. The city had taught its residents a brutal lesson. Survival often meant silence. But there were fragments, and fragments are dangerous, because the mind hates blank spaces, it fills them with monsters. A waitress from a diner 2 blocks away said she'd seen Lila earlier, walking with a man. Tall, she thought. Dark hair. A jacket. But it was late, and she'd been tired, and New York is full of tall men with dark hair and jackets. Another witness, a night clerk at a bodega, claimed it was 2 men, not one, and one of them had a limp. Then a third insisted she'd been alone. Each story collided with the others like cars in fog, metal screaming, nothing clear at the end but wreckage. The detectives went to Lila's apartment as dawn smeared gray across the windows. The hall smelled like fried onions and old carpet. Inside, her place was small, orderly, lived in. A stack of magazines on the coffee table. A half-read paperback with a bookmark made from a receipt. A lipstick tube on the bathroom sink, cap off. The kind of intimate mess that told you she'd expected to come back. No forced entry. No signs of a struggle. The lock wasn't broken. The phone sat quiet on its cradle. The answering machine light blinked red, a tiny warning. They played the tape. There was one message, time-stamped 11:52 p.m. A man's voice. Calm. Almost bored. Lila, it's me. Call me back. No last name. No number. No urgency. Just those 5 words, delivered like an order. The detectives rewound it. Played it again. Turned up the volume. Listened for background noise. A television. Traffic. Music. Something that could place him. There was a faint hum, too low to identify. Kessler wrote the message down in his notebook anyway, as if ink could trap a ghost. They found her friends next. They found Marcy, pale and shaking, insisting she'd left Lila alive. They found co-workers who described Lila as careful, smart, not the type to follow strangers. They found an ex-boyfriend, Daniel Price, who lived uptown and claimed he hadn't seen her in months. He said the breakup had been mutual. He said he'd been home. He said he was sorry. His hands didn't stop moving as he talked, opening, closing, gripping the arms of his chair, like he was trying to physically hold himself together. Kessler asked him about the voicemail. Daniel's face tightened. That wasn't me, he said, too quickly. I don't sound like that. The detectives didn't accuse. Not yet. In 1987, you learned the rhythm of a case. First you listen, then you push, then you watch what cracks. They pulled phone records. They traced calls. They found the number that had dialed Lila's apartment at 11:52 p.m., and it wasn't Daniel's. It belonged to a payphone, one of those steel boxes bolted to the sidewalk like a confession booth, near the West 4th Street station. A payphone. Anonymous. A dead end with fingerprints made of air. They scoured the crime scene again in daylight, when everything looked uglier. The sidewalk stained. The trash bags slumped. A cigarette, but crushed near the curb. A scrap of paper caught in a gutter. They bagged it all. They photographed it. They measured the blood spatter and the angle of the wound, trying to turn violence into geometry. The medical examiner confirmed what Kessler already felt in his bones. The stabbing was deliberate, the blade likely narrow, driven in once with force, angled upward. Close range. Intimate distance. Whoever did it had been right in front of her. Close enough to smell her shampoo. Close enough to feel her last breath. And yet there were no defensive wounds on her hands. No torn nails. No bruises on her arms. That detail rang in Kessler's head like an alarm. No fight. No struggle. That meant one of two things. She hadn't seen it coming, or she had trusted the person who stood close enough to kill her. The papers got hold of it by noon. The story ran hot and fast, blaring across front pages and radio segments, the kind of case that fed the public's appetite for fear. Young woman slain in village, one headline screamed. Mystery stabber still free. Another called it a cold-blooded sidewalk execution, and neighbors began to look at each other differently. Eyes narrowed, locks double-checked. Every passerby briefly transformed into a suspect. Then the letter arrived. It came 3 days after the funeral, delivered to the precinct in a plain white envelope with no return address, postmarked from Midtown. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. No fancy stationery. No perfume. No smudged lipstick. Just typed words, clean and clinical. You're looking in the wrong direction, it said. She opened the door. That was it. No signature. No demand. No obvious threat. 5 words that punched like a fist. The detectives stared at the sentence until it began to blur, because it didn't just taunt them, it suggested something else, something that turned the case inside out. She opened the door. Not a literal door, maybe. Not her apartment door. Something metaphorical. Trust. Access. Invitation. Kessler tried to keep the letter quiet. The city didn't do quiet. A leak found its way to a reporter, and suddenly the words were everywhere, printed in bold like scripture, debated in diners and living rooms. People began inventing meanings. Some said it pointed to a lover. Some said it meant she'd been lured into a car. Some insisted it was the killer playing games, a prank, a sick joke. But Kessler felt the weight of it settle on his chest, because killers who write letters are rarely joking. They are announcing. They are savoring. They are telling you they are still in the room. The investigation tightened like a noose, but every pull slipped through empty air. The cigarette, but had no usable prints. The scrap of paper was nothing. The missing purse never surfaced. Pawn shops came up empty. Hospitals reported no suspicious knife wounds. Informants offered rumors in exchange for cash, names that went nowhere, stories that dissolved under scrutiny. And then, in the middle of the noise, one detail kept returning, stubborn and sharp: Lila's missing earring. It was a small silver stud shaped like a crescent moon. Cheap jewelry, the kind you could buy at a street stall. But its absence mattered because it meant contact. A hand had brushed her ear. A struggle, even if brief. A moment where her body had resisted, if only instinctively. The detectives put out word. They asked jewelers, pawnbrokers, anyone who might see a single mismatched earring. It sounded ridiculous. It sounded desperate. But cases like this are built on ridiculous things, on a fiber, a footprint, a forgotten receipt. Weeks passed. The city moved on, because the city always moves on, but Lila's mother did not. She came down from upstate, grief sharp as broken glass, and stood in the precinct lobby with a photograph in trembling hands. "Find who did this," she said, voice flat, as if she'd already used up every tear. Kessler nodded, because what else could he do? He watched her walk out, shoulders hunched, and he felt something cold settle behind his ribs. Not fear. Not sadness. Something worse. The sense that the case was already beginning to slip into the dark, not because there weren't clues, but because there were too many wrong ones. Then a call came in late one night, a voice on the line that refused to give a name. "You want to know about the girl," the voice said. Male. Low. Controlled. "You should ask about the photographer." Kessler sat up straighter, pen poised. "What photographer?" The line went dead. In the days that followed, detectives dug through Lila's life like archaeologists searching for a single bone. They found a contact in her address book, Eddie photo. They found a note in her desk drawer with a time and a place scribbled in her handwriting. Saturday 10 p.m., Pier 17. No last name. No context. Just a question mark that now looked like a hook. They tracked down Eddie. Edward Lasky. Freelance photographer. 32. Charming smile in his headshot. Eyes that didn't quite match it. He said he'd met Lila once at a magazine event. He said she'd asked him about a portfolio. He said they'd exchanged numbers, nothing more. When Kessler asked about Pier 17, Eddie frowned like he was trying to remember a dream. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe she wanted pictures of the skyline. People ask for all sorts of things." Kessler listened. Watched. Eddie's answers were smooth, too smooth, like he'd practiced them. But smoothness isn't proof. In the end, Eddie had an alibi, two friends who swore he'd been at a loft party in Soho all night, surrounded by music and bodies and light. In 1987, a party could erase almost anything. The case didn't die. It just started to rot. Every few months, another tip. Another sighting. Another whisper of a man in a dark jacket, a limp, a scream, a letter. Every time, Kessler felt the same jolt, hope, adrenaline, the illusion of progress, and every time, it drained away, leaving the precinct lights humming overhead like insects trapped in glass. By the end of that year, the file on Lila Hartman was thick enough to slam a door. Photos, reports, witness statements, evidence logs. A whole paper city built around one dead woman. And still, the killer walked free, moving through the real city with everyone else, blending into crowds, paying for coffee, laughing at jokes, living an ordinary life with extraordinary blood on invisible hands. And somewhere, hidden under all that paper, under all that noise, under every wrong direction, was the simplest truth of all: Lila had been close to home. She had been on familiar streets. She had been steps away from safety, from her own front door, from the life she'd expected to wake up to. And someone met her there, in the narrow gap between midnight and morning, and decided she wouldn't see the sunrise again. Years later, people would say they could still feel it in that neighborhood, like a stain that never fully washed out. A street lamp that seemed a little too bright. A corner that felt too quiet. A single shoe left behind in memory, pointing like an arrow at nothing. And if you listened, really listened, sometimes, in the late hours when the city's roar softened, you could almost hear it again, that brief scream, that sudden silence, and the whisper of a case that refused to stay buried. The city kept walking over the same pavement like nothing had happened, heel after heel, shoe after shoe, commuters grinding their cigarettes into the cracks, tourists stepping around old gum stains, the rain washing the curb and calling it clean, and somewhere under that routine, under that noise, the case sat in a metal drawer that squealed when it opened, a fat folder with Lila Hartman stamped across the tab like a warning label. Kessler tried to keep it alive the way you keep a flame alive in bad weather. Hands cupped, breath controlled, eyes stinging from smoke and sleep, but the precinct didn't run on hope, it ran on numbers, and numbers said move on, numbers said there are fresh bodies, fresh blood, fresh headlines, and this one is going cold right in front of you. He hated the phrase, cold case, because it sounded gentle, like something simply cooled off, like time had politely reduced the heat, but there was nothing polite about it, there was only a slow suffocation, clues drying up, witnesses relocating, memories turning soft and unreliable, the city erasing itself by changing outfits. The letter, she opened the door, became the pulse in the case file, the thing that never stopped beating even when everything else fell silent, and Kessler couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't written to taunt him, it was written to instruct him, like the killer wanted credit for something smarter than a sidewalk stabbing, like he wanted the detectives to understand that this wasn't random violence, this was access. This was permission. This was someone stepping through an invisible threshold and closing it behind them. The problem was, thresholds are everywhere. A bar stool. A phone call. A smile in the street. The wrong person saying the right name. They revisited the payphone near West 4th like it might still be warm with fingerprints. They pulled the maintenance logs. They interviewed the guy who cleaned graffiti off the metal casing. Nothing. The payphone had swallowed too many voices to remember one. They combed Lila's magazine office next, asking questions that made people look away. Did she have enemies? Did she argue with anyone? Did she receive threats? Did she edit a story that humiliated the wrong man? Her co-workers wanted a neat narrative, something they could wrap around their fear like a blanket. A jealous ex. A mugger. A stranger. Anything but the idea that danger could be ordinary, that it could sit beside you at a crowded party and laugh at your jokes. The editor-in-chief, a man with suspenders and a nervous smile, admitted Lila had been working on a feature about nightlife scams, fake promoters, drugged drinks, women robbed after leaving clubs. But it wasn't investigative journalism, not really. More like cautionary entertainment. Still, Kessler wrote it down, because killers love cover stories, and the city was full of predators who wore normal faces. For a while, they chased Daniel Price, the ex who couldn't keep his hands still. They checked his alibi again. They pulled his work schedule. They dug into his finances. They found nothing criminal, only mess, late rent, arguments, old resentments. He took a polygraph and failed 2 questions, which in that era might as well have been a stamp on his forehead, but polygraphs weren't truth machines, they were anxiety machines, and Daniel was a man built from anxiety. Kessler watched him crumble in an interview room, sweat beading on his temples, and still didn't feel the click of certainty. If Daniel had done it, there would be heat somewhere, a flare of ego, a mistake, a threat. Instead there was only fear, the kind that looks like guilt when you're desperate to close a case. They looked at Eddie Lasky, too, the photographer with the smooth answers and the party alibi that smelled like cologne and coincidence. Kessler sent a detective to that loft address in Soho, knocked on doors, hunted down the partygoers. Some remembered Eddie. Some didn't. The night itself had become a blur of drugs, music, and bodies pressed close, a perfect hiding place for lies. No one could place him at a specific time. No one could swear he hadn't slipped out for 20 minutes. But 20 minutes wasn't enough. Not without a car. Not without a plan. Not without leaving something behind. And then the months started stacking like bricks. Summer to fall. Fall to winter. The city grew cold, wind slicing down avenues, the kind of cold that turned street corners into knives. Lila's mother called weekly, then monthly, then less, not because she stopped caring, but because every call ended the same way, with apologies and nothing. Lila's friends stopped saying her name in conversation, because it made the room heavy, like someone had opened a window to a cemetery. The neighborhood changed small things, new locks, brighter bulbs, a few more people walking in groups. The fear didn't vanish. It simply learned to live quietly, like a rat in the walls. Kessler kept the letter pinned above his desk for weeks until a lieutenant told him to take it down, called it unprofessional, called it morbid, but Kessler knew what it really was. A reminder that the killer had reached into the precinct and touched them, that he had left his fingerprints on their minds. Kessler moved the letter into the file, but it stayed in his head, 5 words chewing on him when he tried to sleep. Then, 2 years after the murder, a pawn shop in Queens called in a tip. A man had tried to sell a single earring, silver crescent moon, small, cheap. The owner thought it was weird, thought it was worthless, but he remembered the news coverage, the missing piece, and he got a license plate number before the seller drove off. It wasn't a clean break, it wasn't a miracle, but for Kessler it was oxygen. They ran the plate. It belonged to a battered Bic registered to a man named Harold Givens, 41, long record of petty theft and street hustling, the kind of man who survived by moving other people's property from one pocket to another. They found Harold in a rented room above a laundromat, the air thick with detergent and stale heat. He insisted he'd found the earring in a gutter. He insisted he didn't know anything about Lila. He insisted, until they showed him the file, the photos, the autopsy details, the letter. His face changed when he saw the picture of Lila smiling. Not guilt. Recognition. The kind that comes when you realize the thing you touched has a name. I know that corner, he said finally, voice thin. I was there. That night. Everybody was there. Everybody is always there in New York. That's the problem. Harold admitted he'd been working the streets around the village back then, watching for drunks, watching for tourists, watching for women with purses that looked heavy. He claimed he'd seen Lila talking to a man near a payphone, and when she walked away, the man stayed behind like he was waiting for something. Harold said the man wasn't a local hustler, wasn't a regular. Clean shoes, Harold said. Not like mine. He described a dark jacket, a neat haircut, a face he couldn't fully picture, because he hadn't wanted to get noticed. Harold insisted he didn't see the stabbing, insisted he left before anything happened. He only found the earring later, he said, after the police tape went up and people started whispering, after the ambulance came and the street changed shape. Kessler wanted to believe him. Kessler wanted the earring to be a door that opened. But Harold's story was sand. No name. No proof he'd been there. No reason to trust a man who made his living selling lies by the ounce. Still, the plate, the pawn shop, the earring, those were real. They took it into evidence, and for the first time since the murder, Kessler had something physical that wasn't just blood and absence. They sent the earring for prints. They got nothing usable. Too many hands, too much time. They sent it for trace evidence, hair, fibers. The lab found a few fragments, meaningless without comparison. Technology in 1989 didn't do miracles. It did careful maybes. It did limitations. It did frustration. Harold Givens became a footnote, then a dead end. The earring went back into a bag, sealed, tagged, stored. Another brick in the wall. Years moved like trains, fast, loud, unstoppable. The city of the early 90s was different, then it changed again and again. Kessler got older. His mustache went gray. His partner retired. New detectives came in with fresh eyes and left with tired ones. Every once in a while, someone pulled Lila's file and tried to shake it like a vending machine, hoping a clue would drop. They reviewed the witness statements. They listened to the voicemail. They stared at the letter. The case never fully closed, but it lived in the back rooms of the precinct, a ghost that never learned to haunt quietly. Then, in the late 90s, something happened that cracked the door open just enough to let in new air. A separate case across town, another stabbing, another woman found close to home, another neat wound, another missing purse. Different neighborhood. Different year. But the pattern had a familiar chill. A detective from that case saw Lila's file, and felt the hair rise on his arms. He brought it to Kessler, who was now a lieutenant, shoulders heavier, eyes carrying too many nights. They compared the details. The similarities were not perfect, but killers aren't photocopies. The angle of the wound. The lack of defensive marks. The quickness. The quiet. And then, another letter, in the newer case, a short typed note mailed to the precinct, words arranged like a smirk. 2 cases, 2 letters. That was enough to wake the file from its coma. They formed a small task group, not official enough to get press attention, but hungry enough to keep working. They dug into old evidence with new hands. They pulled the cigarette, but from storage, the scrap of paper, the clothing. They ran what tests they could. They re-interviewed Marcy, now living in Jersey with 2 kids, eyes older, voice cautious, as if saying Lila's name could summon something. They re-interviewed Daniel Price, now heavier, quieter, face lined with the kind of stress that never resolves. He swore again, he wasn't the man on the voicemail. He swore again, he'd been home. And this time, there was something else in his eyes, not fear, but exhaustion, as if the case had been a shadow following him for a decade and he was tired of running from it. They found Eddie Lasky again, too. The photographer had done well. Gallery shows. Magazine covers. A life polished into something impressive. He greeted detectives with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. When they asked about Lila, he sighed like he was being forced to remember something inconvenient. It was a tragedy, he said. I told you what I knew. But Kessler noticed something new, Eddie's hands. The same smooth hands, yes, but now there was a faint scar across the knuckle of his right index finger, pale and old. Kessler asked about it casually. Eddie said it was from a darkroom accident. Acid. A stupid mistake. He laughed it off, but his laughter was too quick, too practiced, like he'd already rehearsed the line in case someone noticed. Nothing pinned him. Not then. Not yet. And then the world changed with science, the way it always does, quietly at first, and then suddenly everything is different. DNA began to crawl out of crime labs like a new language. Cold cases started waking up across the country, old ghosts dragged into the light by a swab, a strand, a microscopic truth. In New York, evidence rooms became gold mines or graveyards depending on what had been saved and how. Kessler watched younger detectives use words he'd never used in 1987, profiles, alleles, databases, and he felt hope sharpen into something almost painful. In 2002, they reopened Lila's case officially, not with a press conference, not with dramatic speeches, but with paperwork and lab requests and a hard conversation about whether the evidence had been contaminated by time, by mishandling, by the simple ignorance of an older era. They pulled Lila's clothing from storage and found the seals intact. They pulled the earring bag. They pulled the cigarette butt. They pulled the envelope from the letter, because whoever mailed it had licked it, or moistened it, or touched it with a tongue that carried identity in cells too small to see. They sent it all to the lab. Weeks passed, then months, then the call came in like a punch. There was a partial DNA profile recovered from the envelope flap. Not clean. Not complete. But something. Enough to compare. Enough to hold like a knife. They ran it through what databases existed then. No match. No match means the person isn't in the system. No match means a clean record. No match means either the killer was careful, or he'd never been caught for anything else. And that idea, an ordinary man with an extraordinary secret, made the case feel more terrifying, not less. It meant he could be anywhere, watching the news, watching the city change, watching detectives chase shadows and smile into his coffee. Still, they had the profile. They had a direction. They had something that wasn't just smoke. In 2008, a young detective named Alana Pierce joined the cold case unit. Sharp eyes, relentless energy, the kind of person who treated old files like living things that could still bleed. She read Lila's case in one night, pages spread across her kitchen table, coffee going cold beside her, and she didn't just see a murder, she saw a story that someone had tried to bury. Alana went back to the beginning, not out of nostalgia, but out of suspicion. She listened to the voicemail again and again, not for the words, but for the rhythm, the breathing, the small hesitations that betray identity. "It's me," the voice had said, like an entitlement, like he believed she'd know instantly, like he'd been in her life close enough to be familiar. Alana started making a list of every man who could plausibly say, "It's me," and expect Lila to respond. Ex-boyfriends. Co-workers. Friends. Sources. That list got long fast, because Lila was social, because she lived in a city where strangers became acquaintances overnight, because community, in New York, is often built from small repeated collisions. But Alana didn't flinch. She narrowed. She cross-referenced. She pulled phone logs that had been impossible to access in 1987. She tracked down old numbers, old address books, old Christmas cards still sitting in boxes. And then she found something that made her stop breathing for a second. A photograph. Not in the official file. Not in evidence. A casual snapshot from a co-worker's album, taken at a magazine party weeks before the murder. Lila is in the center, laughing, a plastic cup in her hand. Around her, faces blur in motion. But behind her shoulder, half turned away from the camera, is a man with dark hair and a neat jacket, eyes angled toward Lila like he's listening too closely. The photo is grainy. The lighting is bad. But the posture, the way he stands close without touching, the way he occupies her space, feels like a warning retroactively painted onto paper. Alana enlarged it. Enhanced it. Stared at it until the pixels became a kind of static hallucination. She took it to Kessler, now retired, pulled back into the case like an old wound reopening. He looked at the face and felt something twist inside him, not recognition exactly, but instinct, the old detective sense that tells you when a shadow is shaped like a person. "Who the hell is that?" he whispered. And in that whisper, the case shifted again, not into resolution, not into clarity, but into something sharper and more dangerous, the sense that the killer had been closer than anyone wanted to admit, not hiding in an alley, not sprinting into the night, but standing at a party under soft light, smiling like he belonged there, close enough to say "it's me" and be believed, close enough to walk with Lila into the city's dark throat, and close enough to vanish afterward without leaving a name. That photograph became a new kind of evidence, not the kind you can hold up in court, not the kind that comes with chain of custody stickers and lab reports, but the kind that crawls under your skin and won't let you sleep, because once you see a figure in the background watching the victim, you start wondering how many other backgrounds you've ignored, how many other watchers have already been in the frame. Alana Pierce carried the printout everywhere for a week, folded inside her notebook, edges softening from her fingers, and every time she unfolded it the man's half-turned face seemed to change, like the image was refusing to settle into certainty, like it enjoyed staying just out of reach. She pinned it above her desk anyway, right where the fluorescent light would hit it, and she built the next move around a simple question that sounded almost childish, but cut straight through the fog. If he was there, who invited him? The magazine party in the photo had been held in a cramped loft over a print shop, the kind of place that smelled like ink and stale beer, with exposed brick and cheap string lights meant to make everyone feel important. The magazine barely had a budget, so the guest list had been a patchwork of staff, friends, freelancers, and anyone who could bring a bottle. 15 years had passed by the time Alana started calling names from that night, and time had scattered those people across marriages and divorces, new cities, new jobs, new faces. Some didn't pick up. Some pretended they didn't remember. A few did remember, vividly, because death is a highlighter. One former intern laughed nervously when Alana said Lila's name, then went quiet like someone had stepped on her throat. "We all thought it was a mugging," the intern said. "We told ourselves that. You know. So we could keep taking the subway." Alana didn't ask about theories. She asked about him. The man behind Lila. Dark hair. Neat jacket. Standing too close. At first the answers were useless. Maybe that's Tony, maybe that's a friend of Marcy's, maybe that's the bartender. But then, on a rainy Tuesday, a retired layout designer named Joel returned Alana's call, and said something that made her sit up, so sharply her chair squealed. "That guy," Joel said. "I remember him. I didn't know his name, but I remember thinking he didn't fit. He was polished. Like he belonged in a nicer room." Joel paused, the sound of his breath loud in the phone line. He talked to Lila. Not long. But he kept leaning in like he was telling her secrets. "What did he look like up close?" Alana asked, and she hated how tight her own voice sounded. Joel's memory was a shaky instrument, but he tried. Early 30s, maybe. Clean-shaven. A watch, something nice, not the kind you'd buy at a street store. And he had this smell, Joel said, embarrassed by the detail. Cologne. Strong. Like he wanted to be remembered. That was the first time the case offered something that felt like a real thread, not a shadow in a witness statement, not a vague tall man, but a scent, a watch, a kind of intentional presence. Alana wrote it all down and then did what she always did when the story got slippery. She grounded it in paperwork. She pulled old event planning notes from the magazine's archives, the kind of dusty folders nobody opens unless they are searching for ghosts. She found a handwritten list labeled possible freelancers. Names, numbers, scribbles. And among them, a nickname, Milo, photos. Photos. The word snapped against the old note about Pier 17 like a rubber band. Alana felt her pulse kick. Eddie Lasky. Photographer. A loft party alibi. A scar on his knuckle. A polished man in a cheap room. She didn't let herself fall in love with the theory. That's how cases poison you. You fall in love, you start seeing only what supports your romance, and you ignore the truth when it tries to whisper. So she built a wider net. She asked, who was Milo, and why was he connected to photos when Eddie already filled that role? She traced the number beside the nickname. It was dead, disconnected long ago, but phone numbers leave footprints if you know where to look. Alana ran it through old directories, old billing records, and found a name attached to that number in 1987, Miles Dietrich. Miles Dietrich wasn't a photographer. He was a freelance fixer, the kind of guy who knew where to get a sound system cheap, where to borrow folding chairs, who to call when you wanted a bartender, who didn't ask questions. He lived in Brooklyn then, worked gigs, drifted through scenes. In the 90s he'd gotten arrested for a small fraud scheme and then vanished from records. Alana tracked him to a last known address in Staten Island, drove out under a sky the color of wet cement, and knocked on a door with peeling paint. A woman answered, wary, eyes scanning Alana's badge like it might bite. Miles, the woman repeated. He's dead. Heart attack. Years ago. Alana felt the case tilt again, the way it always did when a lead died before it could speak. Did he ever talk about Lila Hartman? She asked, showing the photo. The woman's expression tightened. No, she said. Too fast. Then she swallowed. He said he knew her. He said she got mixed up with bad people. That's all. Bad people. The phrase every widow and neighbor uses when they're afraid of specifics. Alana tried to press, but the woman's fear was a wall. I have nothing else, she said, and closed the door slowly, like she was sealing a vault. Alana walked back to her car, with rain dripping off her coat, and that familiar frustration clawing at her throat. The dead don't talk. The living don't want to. And the killer, if he was alive, was out there somewhere, aging like everyone else, watching the calendar flip while Lila stayed 26 forever. Back in Manhattan, she brought the Milo note to her supervisor, and together they did the thing cops do when the puzzle refuses to show its picture. They placed every piece on the table at once. The voicemail from the payphone. The typed letter. The photograph. The missing earring. The earring resurfacing at a pawn shop. The anonymous call about the photographer. The new DNA partial profile from the envelope. They stared until the pieces stopped feeling like separate facts, and started feeling like a pattern that didn't care whether they understood it. Then Kessler, called in as a consultant, said something that changed the temperature in the room. We keep treating the letter like it came from the killer, he said, voice rough with age. But what if it didn't? Alana blinked. You think it was a hoax? Not a hoax, Kessler said. A message. From someone who knew the truth. Someone who couldn't say it outright. The idea sank in slow, like a blade sliding between ribs. If the letter wasn't from the killer, it was from an accomplice, a witness, a frightened insider. Someone who knew Lila, opened the door, to someone dangerous, someone she let in, someone she trusted enough to get close. Alana thought about Joel's detail. The strong cologne. The polished presence. The kind of man who chooses to be remembered. That didn't sound like a man hiding. That sounded like a man performing. She turned to Eddie Lasky again, not because she wanted him to be the answer, but because he kept appearing at the edges of the story like a recurring shadow. They ran Eddie's name through old employment records, known associates, addresses, phone lines. They discovered something small but electric. In 1987, Eddie had shared a studio space for a few months with a man named Miles Dietrich. Milo. Alana stared at the report until the letters seemed to rearrange themselves. Milo wasn't just some random fixer in Lila's orbit. He was connected to Eddie. And Eddie had been connected to Lila. And the anonymous caller had said ask about the photographer. She didn't celebrate. She didn't even smile. Because patterns can be coincidences, and coincidences can get you sued, and in cold cases you don't get to be reckless just because you're hungry. She built a plan that moved like a slow tightening grip. First, she would get Eddie's DNA, legally, cleanly. If the partial profile from the envelope could exclude him, she would stop circling. If it couldn't exclude him, if it matched, then the whole case would ignite. They tried the straightforward route, a request for a voluntary sample. Eddie laughed, polite, charming, offended in a way that looked practiced. "Detective," he said, "I've already answered your questions. This is harassment." He offered coffee like he was hosting a talk show. He refused the sample. He ended the meeting with a smile that looked good on paper, but felt wrong in the air. So Alana did what you do when a man refuses to give you what you need. You watch what he throws away. They put him under discreet surveillance, not flashy, not the kind that makes neighbors call newspapers, but enough to catch discarded cups, cigarette butts, anything with saliva. Eddie wasn't stupid. He didn't smoke. He didn't chew gum. He carried his own water bottle like a cautious athlete. The man had built a life on images, and he understood exposure. Days passed. Then weeks. Surveillance is a slow form of insanity, hours of nothing punctuated by moments of sudden, sharp movement. One afternoon, Eddie attended a gallery opening and drank champagne from a flute handed to him by a server. He set the glass down on a tray and walked away into a crowd. Alana's team moved fast, retrieved the glass, bagged it like it was a grenade. They sent it to the lab. When the result came back, Alana didn't breathe until she read the words twice. Not a match. Eddie's DNA did not match the partial profile from the letter envelope. Relief should have come then. It didn't. Alana felt something colder. Because exclusion isn't innocence, it's just a closed door. Eddie could still be involved without licking an envelope. He could still be the man in the photograph without being the man who mailed the letter. And someone else, someone still unidentified, had left DNA on a message tied to Lila's death. That meant the killer, or the insider, still had a voice in the evidence. Still had a biological shadow on paper. Alana pivoted, hard. If Eddie wasn't the DNA contributor, who was? She asked the lab for more. Could the DNA be from someone who handled the envelope in the precinct? A clerk? A detective? Cross-contamination? The lab reviewed the chain of custody, reviewed the profiles of personnel where available. No match. The DNA wasn't from them. It was from someone outside the building. They ran the profile again through the databases, which by then were larger, deeper, hungrier. Again, no match. No match is a kind of scream in a modern investigation. It means the person has never been caught, never been swabbed, never been forced into the system. Or it means the person is dead, their DNA never recorded, their secrets buried with them. Alana wasn't satisfied with either possibility. She went back to the typed letters. Not just Lila's letter, but the later one from the similar stabbing. She studied the typeface, the spacing, the ink. In the 80s, typewriters left fingerprints in the form of misaligned letters and worn keys. Photocopiers left lines, printers left patterns. She had the letters examined by a document analyst, and the analyst said something that made the room feel smaller. The type on both letters likely came from the same machine. Same machine. Same hand, or at least the same tool. Tools last. Tools move. Tools get sold. Tools get thrown away. But tools also travel with the kind of person who enjoys control, who enjoys crafting a message. They traced the later case's letter to. Postmark. Midtown. Similar to Lila's. And then Alana did something that felt almost absurd. She started looking for the typewriter itself. Pawn shops. Estate sales. Antique stores. Classified ads. It was a long shot, the kind of long shot that gets you mocked until it works. She built a list of likely models based on the typeface analysis. Then she built a list of the kinds of people who owned such machines in the late 80s, writers, office workers, photographers who liked captions on prints, men who didn't trust computers because computers were too traceable, too modern, too honest. She visited Eddie's studio under the pretense of following up on unrelated questions. The walls were lined with framed photographs, the lighting perfect, the place curated like a museum of his own life. Eddie watched her with that same polite smile. Alana scanned the room, eyes moving over shelves, desks, drawers. No typewriter in sight. No obvious relic. But then she noticed a thing on a high shelf, an old carrying case, scuffed, the kind used to transport equipment. Eddie's gaze flicked to it for half a second and then away. A tiny motion. Almost nothing. The kind of nothing that makes a detective's stomach drop. Alana didn't reach for it. Not yet. She didn't have a warrant. She didn't have probable cause strong enough to survive a judge. She smiled back, thanked Eddie for his time, and left with the sensation that she'd just walked past a loaded weapon. Outside, the city was loud, indifferent. Taxi horns. Sirens. People arguing over coffee. Life happening like it always did. But Alana felt the case reforming, not into a neat solution, but into a living monster with multiple heads. Eddie was a door. Milo was a door. The unknown DNA contributor was a door. The typewriter was a door. And somewhere behind one of them was the thing the letter promised, the truth that Lila had opened something, and once it opened, it never closed again. That night, Alana sat alone in her apartment with the photograph spread on her table, her finger tracing the blurred outline of the man's jacket, and she imagined the moment Lila looked up under the street lamp, eyes half open, the city's noise fading as if someone had turned down the world. She imagined the killer's breath in her air. She imagined the missing earring torn away in a brief flash of resistance. And she imagined the killer, afterward, calmly walking to a mailbox in Midtown, sliding a typed message into the slot, sealing it with saliva, leaving behind a microscopic signature, a cruel little breadcrumb that would wait for decades in a plastic bag until someone like Alana came along and decided the past didn't get to stay quiet. Somewhere out there, a typewriter key had struck paper twice with the same rhythm, the same pressure, the same certainty. Somewhere out there, a man had watched a woman laugh at a party and thought, not admiration, not desire, but opportunity. And the case, reopened and bleeding again, began to feel less like history, and more like a trap slowly closing, not just around the killer, but around anyone who dared to keep asking the city to remember what it would rather forget. The carrying case on Eddie Lasky's shelf sat there like a sealed confession, scuffed corners, dulled latches, the kind of object that looked ordinary until you realized someone had gone out of their way to keep it, to elevate it, to place it up high like a relic that didn't belong in the clean, curated museum of his studio. Alana Pierce didn't need to touch it to feel its weight, didn't need to open it to hear the metallic click in her imagination, the sound of a secret being unlatched, because she'd seen that look in Eddie's eyes. Just a flicker, just a tremor, when her gaze found it. And in a cold case you learn to live for flickers, you learn that truth rarely kicks down the door, it slips under it in the form of a tiny mistake. She walked away that day with her hands empty and her instincts lit like a fuse, and the fuse burned through the next week, while she built a warrant application that wouldn't fall apart under a judge's stare, because suspicion is cheap and warrants are expensive, and if she moved too soon she'd blow the case apart and give Eddie a clean exit, the chance to sanitize whatever lived inside that case. So she did what the city always did when it wanted something. She waited, and she watched, and she collected. Eddie's life looked innocent from the outside, a pattern of gallery openings and client meetings, dinners in well-lit restaurants, weekend drives out of the city like he had nothing to hide. But hiding isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's the careful routine of a man who knows exactly what kind of eyes are on him and refuses to give them anything. He never smoked. He never chewed gum. He rarely left a glass unattended. He washed his hands too often. He carried his own pen. Small habits that felt like cleanliness until you saw them as a strategy. Even his smile had that polished restraint, like he'd learned long ago that emotion is evidence. Alana's surveillance team worked him like a puzzle with no edges. They followed him through Manhattan crowds, kept him in sight through subway transfers, watched him step into buildings and come out again with the same measured pace. They logged every stop, every contact, every deviation. And then, late on a Thursday, Eddie did something that made the whole operation lean forward at once. He went to a storage facility in Long Island City. Not his studio. Not his home. A storage unit. Those quiet concrete hallways lined with roll-up doors like teeth, each one hiding someone's extra life. People store furniture there. Holiday decorations. Old clothes. But people also store the things they can't keep near them, the things that smell like the past, the things that could ruin them if found. Eddie punched in a code at the gate, drove inside, and disappeared down a row. The team couldn't see which unit. Not yet. But they had the location, and location is leverage. Alana didn't rush. She didn't pounce. She didn't let the adrenaline write the narrative. She requested the facility's access logs, got the manager talking, and learned Eddie had rented the unit under a company name, paid in advance, visited irregularly for years. Irregular is a word that makes detectives hungry. It means the unit isn't for seasonal decorations. It's for something you don't want to see often, something you only check on when your nerves get loud. She ran the company name and found it was real, registered, tied to Eddie's business. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. But a storage unit meant contents, and contents meant potential. She still needed a warrant, and she still didn't have the one thing that turns potential into probable cause. So she widened the lens. If Eddie wasn't the DNA contributor on the letter, then the DNA belonged to someone adjacent, someone connected. Someone who could have used Eddie as a doorway into Lila's life. Someone who could have stood at that party with a watch and strong cologne and listened to her laugh like it was a lock clicking open. That's when Alana went back to Miles Dietrich's widow. She didn't knock this time with the gentle patience of an investigator seeking cooperation. She knocked with the gravity of a case that had outlived too many people. The woman opened the door again, face tense, eyes darting. Alana didn't start with questions. She started with the oldest tool in the box, silence. She stood there, let the woman feel the weight of the badge, the weight of the years, and the woman's posture softened by a fraction, like exhaustion was finally heavier than fear. I'm not here to hurt you, Alana said, voice low. I'm here because someone hurt her, and you've been living with something you don't want to say. The woman's throat bobbed. I told you. I don't know anything. You know enough to be afraid, Alana said, and she held up the photograph. The widow stared at the blurred figure behind Lila, and something changed in her eyes, something like a crack in glass. That's not Miles, she whispered. No, Alana said. But Miles knew him. The widow's hands trembled. She looked past Alana, down the hallway, as if expecting someone to be standing there listening. He came to the apartment once, she said. Years ago. After the girl died. Miles was shaking. I'd never seen him shake. He said he'd gotten mixed up. He said he didn't mean. She stopped, lips pressed tight. Who came to the apartment? Alana asked, and she kept her voice flat, because urgency can scare people back into silence. The widow swallowed hard. A man. Clean. Smelled like expensive soap. She rubbed her palms on her jeans like she could wipe the memory off. He told Miles to keep his mouth shut. He told him he'd done his part. And then he handed Miles an envelope with cash. I saw it. Alana felt the hairs on her arms rise. Did Miles say the man's name? The widow hesitated, then nodded once, small and miserable. He called him Victor, she said. Miles called him Victor like he didn't want to. Like it burned. Victor. A name. Not a full name. Not enough. But names are gasoline. They soak into everything. Alana asked what Victor looked like, and the widow tried: dark hair, neat jacket, watch, eyes that didn't look friendly. The details echoed Joel's memory like a chorus. Alana asked if she knew where Victor worked, where he lived, who he was. The widow shook her head, tears gathering. Miles said he was a client. One of those men who pay for things and don't want receipts. Pay for what? Alana asked. The widow's voice dropped to a whisper. Access, she said, and it sounded like a curse. Alana left the house with the air in her lungs feeling sharp, like she'd just swallowed glass. Victor wasn't proof. But Victor was a door. And the letter, she opened the door, suddenly felt less like poetry and more like an instruction manual, a reminder of how the killer got close. A man didn't need to stalk Lila for months if he could step into her world through a fixer like Miles, through a photographer like Eddie, through a party invitation and a familiar "it's me." Alana ran the name through everything: arrest records, employment, property, DMV. Victor is a common name. In New York, common names are forests. But she didn't need every Victor. She needed the Victor who moved like money, who paid in cash, who had the confidence to intimidate, who left no record. A clean man. A polished man. She did something colder. She looked for men in Eddie's orbit who weren't in Eddie's public life. Gallery circles have their own gravitational fields: wealthy patrons, private collectors, men who never pose for photos because they control the camera. Alana requested guest lists from old openings, donation rosters, invitations. Most were locked behind privacy, lawyers, and polite refusals. But polite refusals can be pierced if you phrase things the right way, if you imply the wrong kind of publicity. She got a few lists. Then more. Names. Addresses. Contacts. And there it was, buried in a list from a 1998 fundraiser: Victor Carraway. Not Victor Dietrich. Not Victor Lasky. Victor Carraway, listed as a benefactor, no phone number, only a business address in Midtown. A man with money. A man with distance. Alana pulled the corporate filings for the address. Carraway's name appeared in connection with a small consulting firm that had dissolved years ago. She traced it to a new firm, then another. The trail didn't vanish, it shifted. Like Victor had learned how to shed skins. She ran property searches. There was a co-op on the Upper East Side tied to a trust with Victor's initials. She requested a background check through lawful channels, careful, quiet. What came back wasn't dramatic: no arrests, no convictions, no fingerprints in the system. But there were civil suits, small ones, disputes, accusations of breach, hush-hush settlements. The kind of paper trail that follows people who like control. Alana needed DNA. She needed a match that would turn a name into a hand on an envelope. They didn't have Victor's DNA. They had no reason to compel it. But Victor lived in a city that sheds DNA like skin. He would leave it somewhere. Everyone does. The question was whether you could catch it without spooking him. They put Victor under surveillance the way they'd put Eddie under surveillance: discreet, patient, hungry. Victor Carraway moved differently than Eddie. Eddie moved like a man who feared exposure. Victor moved like a man who believed exposure didn't apply to him. He ate at private clubs. He entered buildings through side doors. He spoke to doormen as if they were furniture. He smiled rarely, and when he did it looked like a transaction. One afternoon he stepped out of a midtown building and into a black sedan, the kind that waits. A driver opened the door. Victor slid in. The sedan pulled away. Alana's team followed, and Victor didn't go home, didn't go to a club. He went to Long Island City. To the same storage facility Eddie had visited. The team watched Victor drive in, punch a code, pass through the gate. Their vision was blocked at the same point. Rows of metal doors, concrete angles, blind corners. But the coincidence hit like a siren. Eddie and Victor. Same facility. Same hidden hallway. Either this was a shared convenience, or it was a shared secret. Alana moved faster after that, because now she had something closer to probable cause. Two men tied to the case's orbit using the same storage location, one of them connected to a dead fixer, who'd been paid to keep quiet, the other a photographer flagged by an anonymous call and a suspicious carrying case. She drafted her warrant request like a blade, the historical connections, the new witness statement from Miles Dietrich's widow, the pattern of letters tied to a single typewriter, the storage facility overlap. She didn't overreach. She didn't claim certainty. She framed it the way judges understand, reasonable grounds to believe evidence connected to the Hartman homicide may be found. The judge signed. That signature didn't feel like victory. It felt like stepping into a dark room where something might be waiting. They hit the storage facility at 6:10 a.m., when the city was still yawning, when the sidewalks were wet from overnight mist and the sky looked like bruised steel. The manager, startled and cooperative, led them down the corridor. Keys rattled. Doors loomed. They found Eddie's unit first, tied to the company name. They found Victor's unit, separate, but close enough to taste the same air. 2 doors. 2 locks. 2 lives hidden in parallel. They opened Eddie's unit. Inside, it wasn't furniture. It wasn't holiday decorations. It was boxes, stacked neat, labeled in Eddie's precise handwriting. Film canisters. Contact sheets. Old equipment. Cameras wrapped in cloth. A life of images. But as they dug deeper, the normal gave way to the strange. A box of women's accessories, scarves, earrings, bracelets, cheap things mixed with a few expensive pieces, like trophies collected without a pattern. Alana's stomach clenched. There was no innocent explanation for a box of mismatched jewelry in a man's storage unit, not one that didn't sound like a lie. And then they found the carrying case. The same kind she'd seen in his studio, but older, heavier. They unlatched it and opened it, and the smell that rose out was dust and machine oil and time. Inside sat a typewriter. A portable typewriter, dark green casing, keys worn, the E slightly chipped, the kind of machine that would leave tiny signatures in every letter it ever wrote. Alana felt a cold wave pass through her, as if the past had just stepped into the present and stood too close. She didn't touch the keys with bare hands. She didn't need to. She could already hear the rhythm, the clack, 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 forming words meant to cut. They bagged it. They labeled it. They moved on. Then they opened Victor Carraway's unit. Victor's space was emptier, cleaner, like he'd stripped it for efficiency. A few boxes. A suit bag. A locked metal file cabinet. They forced it open and found folders, financial documents, private correspondence, photographs. And in one folder, a set of photocopied newspaper clippings from 1987. Lila Hartman's murder. Headlines. Photos. Articles yellowed at the edges. Someone had kept them. Someone had preserved them like a private scrapbook. Alana stared at the clippings and felt the room tighten around her. Eddie's unit had the tool. Victor's unit had the obsession. They found one more thing in Victor's unit that made the air feel suddenly thin, a small velvet pouch. Inside, a single silver crescent moon earring. Not both. One. The missing piece from Lila's body, sitting in a velvet pouch like a charm, like a memory, like proof someone had been close enough to take it and keep it for decades. Alana's hands shook once, just once, then steadied, because this was the kind of moment detectives dream of and dread at the same time, the moment the case stops being a story and becomes a living thing in your hands. They rushed the typewriter to the document lab. They tested the key alignment, compared it to the letters. They typed sample lines, scanned them, overlaid them like forensic ghosts. And when the analyst called, his voice held that particular strain of excitement that tries to stay professional and fails. "It's consistent," he said. "Highly consistent. The same machine could have produced the letters. Could have. Not did. But in law, could have becomes enough when it's stacked with everything else, storage units, clippings, the earring, the dead fixer's widow, the polished man named Victor, who shared a hidden facility with the photographer tied to an anonymous warning." Alana pushed for DNA next. They swabbed the typewriter keys, skin cells trapped in the grooves. They swabbed the velvet pouch. They swabbed the file cabinet handle. They took everything to the lab and waited, because science moves at its own brutal pace, and waiting is torture when the truth is finally within reach. Victor Carraway didn't panic when they approached him. Panic is for people who believe they can lose. Victor met them in his co-op lobby with a calm that felt rehearsed, the doorman watching like a statue. "This is outrageous," Victor said mildly, as if the word were a piece of etiquette. "I've done nothing wrong." Alana watched his face. Not fear. Not confusion. Just irritation, like a man being inconvenienced by a storm he didn't order. "We recovered items connected to a homicide," she said, and she made sure her voice didn't spike, because emotion gives men like Victor something to mock. Victor's eyes flicked once, the smallest slip, and then settled. "Connected how?" he asked, smooth as glass. Alana held his gaze. "We're going to find out," she said. And then, as if the city itself wanted to remind her that cold cases don't resolve neatly, the lab called with a result that hit like a slap. The DNA from the typewriter keys was mixed, degraded. Partial. Difficult. Not a clean profile. But the swab from the envelope, Lila's letter, still sat in evidence, still held its partial signature, and now they had new partials to compare, new pieces to try to lock together. When the analyst finally spoke, he didn't sound triumphant. He sounded cautious. "We have a partial association," he said. "Not definitive. But there are shared markers. Shared markers. Enough to haunt. Not enough to convict." Alana stared out of her office window at the city skyline, the same skyline Lila might have wanted photographed at Pier 17, the same skyline that had watched her die. A typewriter in Eddie's unit. Clippings and the earring in Victor's. A dead fixer who'd been paid to shut up. A letter saying she opened the door. It was all there, nearly there, like a fist closing around smoke. And that's when Alana realized the worst possibility wasn't that Victor was innocent. The worst possibility was that Victor was guilty in a way the law couldn't easily prove, that the case was about influence and access and carefully distributed roles. One man brings the victim into orbit, one man makes the call from the payphone, one man writes the letter, one man keeps the trophy, and all of them hide behind the same clean suits and clean records, protected not by darkness, but by the ordinary machinery of a city that forgets what it can't file neatly. Outside, New York kept moving, indifferent as ever, but the case had shifted into a new kind of danger, because now the killer, or the network, knew they were being watched, and whoever had once typed a message to a precinct in 1987 had already proved they liked to speak from the shadows. The city didn't flinch when the warrants hit, It never does. It just kept swallowing noise and spitting out new noise. But inside the cold case unit the air changed the moment Victor Carraway's name landed on the board in black marker. Because names like that don't sit still. They come with attorneys, with phone calls that don't feel like calls but like pressure, with polite threats wrapped in expensive manners. And Alana Pierce could feel the invisible machinery beginning to turn, gears of influence, gears of delay, gears designed to make a homicide investigation feel like a misunderstanding that should quietly disappear. It started the same afternoon they walked Victor into an interview room, and he didn't ask for water, didn't ask what time it was, didn't ask if he could call someone, because he already knew the script, because men like Victor don't wait to be rescued, they arrive with rescue prearranged, and sure enough, before Alana even finished reading him his rights, a man in a tailored suit appeared at the precinct desk, with a briefcase like a shield and a smile like a blade, introducing himself as counsel, requesting immediate access, requesting copies, requesting restraint, and the word request sounded almost humorous given the way the room tightened around it. Victor sat with his hands folded neatly, posture straight, eyes calm, the kind of calm that makes your skin itch, because it's the calm of someone who believes consequences are for other people. And when Alana placed the photocopied clippings on the table, Lila's face, Lila's name, the old headlines screaming from yellow paper, Victor didn't react the way an innocent man should. He didn't recoil. He didn't look confused. He looked annoyed, as if she'd laid a dirty napkin in front of him. "You're telling me I collected newspaper articles," he said mildly. "Is that a crime now?" Alana kept her voice flat, kept it clean, because emotion is food for predators. "You kept them for decades," she said. "You stored them. You kept an earring connected to the victim." Victor's gaze held steady. "You found an earring," he corrected, careful with language like a man stepping around glass. "You don't know whose it is." Alana leaned in just enough for him to feel her presence. "It matches the one missing from her body," she said. "A silver crescent. One of a pair." Victor's mouth twitched, a tiny movement that could have been disdain or a suppressed smile. "People wear crescent earrings," he said. "New York is full of crescents." And there it was, the tactic: normalize the abnormal until it looks like you're crazy for pointing at it, until you're the hysterical one, the one seeing patterns in clouds. He didn't deny having the pouch. He didn't deny having the clippings. He denied meaning. He denied connection. He denied the narrative. He insisted on coincidence like it was a religion. Then Alana slid the typewriter report across the table, the analyst's words about consistency, alignment, worn keys, the possibility that the same machine created both letters. And she watched Victor's eyes skim it with a speed that told her he'd read far more dangerous documents than this. And when he looked up he didn't look rattled. He looked bored. "A typewriter," he said. "So now I'm a writer." "You share a storage facility with Edward Lasky," Alana said, and she let that name hang. Victor's eyelids lowered a fraction. "I don't know who that is." A lie delivered like a silk handkerchief. Alana didn't call it out. She didn't have to. She watched his throat. Watched his hands. Watched the rhythm of his breathing. He was controlled, but control has seams, and in that moment the seam was the slightest stiffening of his shoulders, the micro-flinch of a man hearing a familiar doorbell in the middle of the night. His lawyer cut in, voice smooth and loud. "Detective, my client is not answering speculative questions. We will gladly respond to any direct allegations supported by admissible evidence." Admissible. The word that turns truth into a courtroom puzzle, the word that makes detectives want to punch walls. Alana felt the heat rise behind her ribs, forced it down, because this wasn't about winning a conversation, it was about building a cage that could hold. Victor left an hour later without cuffs, without sweat, without fear, and as he walked through the precinct lobby he glanced once at the bulletin board where old photos of fallen officers hung, and the glance was so casual, so indifferent, it felt like disrespect, like he'd already decided this building couldn't touch him. But after Victor left, the case didn't go quiet. It got louder in ways that weren't public, the kind of loud that lives in phone rings and locked doors. Eddie Lasky's attorney called that same night, furious, demanding explanations for the search, claiming harassment, threatening civil action. The storage facility manager suddenly couldn't locate certain log files when detectives requested copies. A lab supervisor mentioned in a strained tone that the district attorney's office had questions about resource allocation. Why were they pushing so hard on a decades-old homicide with partial DNA and no clean match? Why were they tying up analysts? Why now? And Alana heard the unspoken part beneath those questions. Why are you poking at men who might poke back? She went back to the basics, because when the top of the case starts getting greasy, you grab the bottom, the parts no one can polish. The earring. The typed letter. The voicemail. The dead fixer's widow. She drove to Staten Island again, not because she wanted to torture the woman, but because she sensed the fragile thread might snap if she didn't keep tension on it. And when the widow opened the door this time, her face was pale and tight like someone had just drained her blood. They came, she whispered before Alana could speak. 2 men. They asked about you. Alana's pulse kicked hard. When? Last night, the widow said, eyes glossy. They said I should stop talking, that I was going to ruin people's lives. They knew my name. They knew where my daughter goes to school. The word school hit like a brick. Alana felt anger flare bright and hot, the kind that makes your vision sharpen. Did you call the police? The widow laughed once, bitter. You are the police. Alana stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and the house felt suddenly smaller, as if fear had swollen in the walls. Tell me exactly what they said, Alana insisted, and the widow described the men as clean, polite, not threatening in the obvious ways, which is always worse, because obvious threats can be arrested, subtle threats can be denied. One of them had a scent she couldn't stop mentioning, expensive soap, expensive cologne, the same kind of scent Joel had described at the magazine party. The widow said one man called her by her first name as if they were friends. She said he told her to remember what happened to the girl in Manhattan. He didn't say Lila's name. He didn't have to. Alana left the widow's house with a protective detail arranged, paperwork filed, anger buzzing under her skin like electricity, and the city looked different on the drive back. Same streets, same traffic, but now every black sedan felt like a shadow with intent. Every man in a clean jacket felt like a message. She thought about the typed letter again. She opened the door, and it began to sound less like a riddle and more like a warning directed at anyone who kept opening doors for the wrong people, the way the widow had opened hers and let fear step in. Back at the precinct, Alana demanded a meeting with the DA's office, and she fought for the case the way you fight, when you know you might never get another shot. She laid out the evidence without drama, the typewriter consistency, the trophy-like jewelry, the stored clippings, the shared facility, the witness statement about cash payments and intimidation, the anonymous call pointing to the photographer, the partial DNA association. The ADA listened, fingers steepled, eyes cool. You don't have a match, he said. You have a story. A story that comes with a trophy from the victim, Alana snapped, and she hated the bite in her own voice, but couldn't stop it. The ADA held up a hand. I'm not saying walk away, he said. I'm saying you need something that survives trial. You need a clean DNA match, or a confession. Otherwise this becomes a circus, and circus cases collapse. Confession. Alana almost laughed. Men like Victor don't confess. They outsource guilt. They pay it to keep quiet. They store it in units behind gates with codes. So she turned to what she could control, the science. If the envelope DNA was partial, maybe it could be improved. If the typewriter swab was mixed, maybe it could be separated with newer methods. If the earring pouch had touched DNA, maybe it could be amplified. She pressed the lab, not with pleading, but with precision, with documentation, with requests that couldn't be waved away as emotional. The analysts worked, careful, slow, because old evidence is fragile, and every test can destroy what it touches. While the lab worked, Alana did something that felt like stepping onto thin ice. She tried to crack Eddie. Eddie Lasky met her in a conference room at his attorney's office, walls lined with glossy photographs of cityscapes, the kind of art that makes crime feel far away. Eddie looked irritated, but underneath the irritation there was something else now, a tension in his jaw, a restlessness in his eyes, like a man who can't decide whether to be insulted or scared. Alana watched him and thought about the storage unit, the box of mismatched jewelry, the typewriter carrying case, the way his DNA didn't match the envelope, but his life still sat too close to the blast radius. "I didn't kill her," Eddie said immediately, voice tight, before she'd asked anything, as if his brain had been rehearsing the line in the mirror. "I didn't say you did," Alana replied, and she let the silence stretch, just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Eddie's lawyer cleared his throat. "Detective, this meeting is voluntary. We'll keep it brief." Alana nodded, then placed a photograph on the table, not the party photo, but a photo of the typewriter being carried out of Eddie's storage unit in an evidence bag, the metal glinting under fluorescent light. Eddie's eyes flicked down, and the color drained from his face in a slow wave, and in that moment Alana felt something shift, like she'd found the nerve. "That machine wrote letters," she said softly. "One of them came after Lila Hartman died." Eddie's lips parted, then closed. His throat bobbed. "It's a typewriter," he said, too fast. "I collect old equipment." "You collect women's jewelry too?" Alana asked, and she saw Eddie flinch. There it was, the seam. Eddie's lawyer's voice sharpened. "Detective." Alana cut him off with her gaze. "You can't explain that box," she said to Eddie, and she kept her voice low, intimate, like she was telling him a secret. "Not in court. Not to the press. Not to yourself." Eddie's hands trembled, barely. "Those aren't trophies," he whispered, and the whisper sounded like denial aimed inward. "I bought stuff. At flea markets. For shoots." "For shoots," Alana echoed, and she leaned closer. "Then tell me why Lila's earring was in Victor Carraway's unit." Eddie went still. His eyes widened a fraction. And in that fraction, Alana saw it, recognition. "You know him," she said, not as a question. Eddie stared at the table like it had become a cliff edge. "I've met a lot of people," he said. "Victor," Alana pressed. "Victor Carraway." Eddie's jaw tightened. His lawyer shifted in his chair like he was preparing to end the meeting. Eddie inhaled, slow, and when he spoke his voice had changed, quieter, stripped of Polish. "He isn't what you think," Eddie said. Alana felt her pulse hammer. "Then what is he?" Eddie's eyes lifted, and for the first time his smile was gone completely. "He's a collector," Eddie said, and the word landed like something dirty. "A collector of what?" Alana demanded. Eddie's gaze darted to his lawyer, then away. "Moments," he said, and his voice shook. "Control. People." Alana held his stare, kept her breathing steady, because this was the edge where men start telling the truth and then panic and yank it back. "Did he know Lila?" she asked. Eddie swallowed. "I didn't introduce them," he said quickly, too quickly. "I didn't." "But you knew her," Alana said, and she could feel the room tightening like a fist. "You were around her. You were around the people around her. Miles Dietrich, was around you. And then she ends up dead." Eddie's face twisted as if he'd tasted something bitter. "Miles was a runner," he said. "He got things. Parties. Places. Girls who wanted to meet the right people. He stopped, breathing hard, and his lawyer hissed his name like a warning. Alana didn't move. She let Eddie's own words hang in the air, heavy, incriminating, because now he had stepped into the story and couldn't pretend he was outside it. Victor liked access, Eddie said, voice low. He liked knowing he could walk into a room and take whatever he wanted. He'd pay people to open doors. The phrase slammed into Alana's mind like a perfect lock clicking shut. She opened the door. The letter. The riddle. The instruction. Did Victor pay Miles? Alana asked. Eddie's eyes glittered with fear now, real fear, the kind that finally leaks out when a man realizes the monster is closer than the police. I don't know, he whispered. I never asked. You don't ask Victor questions. Alana felt a chill crawl up her spine, because that wasn't just fear of legal trouble, that was fear of retaliation, fear learned from experience. Before she could push further, Eddie's lawyer stood, sharp and decisive. We're done, he said, voice crisp. Any further questions go through me. Eddie didn't stand right away. He sat frozen, staring at the table, as if he'd just confessed to something he couldn't unsay. Then, as he rose, he leaned toward Alana and murmured, so softly she barely caught it, he keeps things. Alana watched him leave, watched the door close, and the moment it clicked shut she felt the case transform again, not into a solved murder, not into clean certainty, but into an exposed nerve, raw and dangerous. Victor keeps things. Trophies. Evidence. People's fear. And if Eddie was telling the truth, Victor didn't just kill with a knife, he killed with proximity, with money, with doors opened by desperate hands. That night, the lab called again, and the analyst's voice carried a tremor that didn't belong to routine. They'd extracted additional touch DNA from the velvet pouch that held the crescent earring. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't full. But it was better than before, clearer, stronger, enough to compare. Alana's heart thudded as the analyst read the result. The pouch DNA shared significant markers with the envelope DNA. The same unknown contributor, or someone closely related, had touched both. Not definitive. Still partial. Still a legal minefield. But the pattern was tightening, the circle shrinking, and for the first time in decades, the case felt like it had teeth. Alana stood by her office window afterward and looked out at the city's lights, each one a life, each one a secret, and she imagined Victor Carraway walking through Midtown in 1987 with an envelope in his pocket, calm as a man going to dinner, sliding it into a mailbox like a routine errand, leaving saliva on paper like a signature, and then, years later, slipping a single silver earring into velvet and locking it away, not because he needed to hide it, but because he wanted to keep it, because keeping it meant he could own the moment forever. The skyline stared back at her, indifferent, and somewhere out there, behind clean windows and coded gates, a man who believed he was untouchable was starting to realize someone had finally found the doors he'd used, and the thought didn't make Alana feel safe, it made her feel the way you feel when you hear a lock turning from the other side. When the pouch DNA came back with those shared markers, the whole room went quiet in the way an operating room goes quiet right before the first incision, because everyone understood what that meant even if no one said it out loud. The evidence wasn't just pointing, it was breathing. It was reaching across decades with fingertips made of skin cells and saliva, and it was finally close enough to hurt. Alana Pierce kept the printout in her hands longer than necessary, eyes scanning the strings of letters and numbers until they blurred, because partial profiles are cruel that way. They promise you a face, and then refuse to draw it fully. They give you an outline and dare you to fill in the rest without making a mistake that will kill the case in court. Shared markers could mean the same person touched both items. Shared markers could mean a close relative. Shared markers could mean contamination. Shared markers could mean everything and nothing. But in a case built on doors and trophies and typed taunts, Shared markers felt like a pulse you could finally track. Victor Carraway's attorney called the next morning, voice smooth as glass, requesting return of personal property, seized from the storage unit, asserting overreach, asserting privacy, asserting the kind of rights that always sound louder when they come wrapped in money. Alana didn't argue. She didn't threaten. She listened, took notes, and felt the pressure line up behind the call like a row of black cars. The attorney asked about the earring. Alana said it was evidence. The attorney asked about the typewriter. Alana said it was evidence. The attorney asked about timelines, about intent, about whether Victor was being formally accused. Alana said nothing she didn't have to. When the call ended, she sat for a moment with the dial tone buzzing in her ear, and thought about the widow's pale face, the way intimidation can arrive polite and still leave bruises. She walked down to the evidence room and stood in front of the sealed bags like they were reliquaries, velvet pouch, earring, envelope, typewriter. Plastic crinkled under fluorescent light. Tags swung gently when she breathed too close. Each item was a fragment of a night the city refused to remember, and each fragment was now tied together by something microscopic and brutal: touch. Alana had learned early that killers don't just take lives, they take objects, and objects become anchors, and anchors can drag the past back into the present if you pull hard enough. The DA's office wanted hard enough to survive trial. Partial association didn't make them smile. It made them hesitate. Victor's lawyer would slice it to ribbons. Defense experts would talk about alleles and stochastic effects until a jury's eyes glazed. The case needed a clean hit. A match that slammed shut like a steel door, not a story, not a vibe, not a pattern that looked obvious only to the people desperate enough to stare at it every day. Alana had one move left that didn't rely on the lab. She could make Victor talk. Interviews aren't about questions. They're about gravity. You don't get confessions by yelling. You get them by building a room where silence feels heavier than speech. Men like Victor don't fear cops, they fear loss of control. They fear public humiliation. They fear the moment their curated life becomes a headline with the wrong verbs. So Alana aimed at the only thing she suspected Victor truly valued: his image as untouchable. They brought him back in under the pretext of clarifying property issues, kept it procedural, boring, the kind of thing a man like Victor might attend without fully arming himself. He arrived in a charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, as if he wanted to project relaxed authority, and he looked around the precinct with faint disdain, like he could smell the mildew in the walls. His lawyer wasn't with him at first. Alana noted that. A crack. A scheduling mistake. A sliver of time. They put Victor in the same interview room Lila's ex had once sweated in, same table, same scuffed chairs, same fluorescent hum that makes everyone look slightly sick. Victor sat neatly, fingers interlaced. Alana didn't sit right away. She stood, let him look up at her, let him feel the imbalance. "You asked about your property," she said, tone mild. Victor's eyes narrowed. "I asked for my property to be returned," he corrected, the word "my" sharpened with ownership. Alana slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, storage unit contents, the typewriter, the clippings, the velvet pouch, the earring. Victor flipped through them with the detachment of a man reading a menu, and when he reached the earring he paused. Just half a beat, and Alana felt it like a warm wire snapping. He recovered instantly, but the pause lived. "You keep souvenirs," Alana said softly. Victor looked up, expression blank. "You keep making stories," he replied. Alana nodded as if he'd made a fair point, then opened a second folder and laid out the magazine party photograph, Lila laughing, the blurred crowd, the man behind her. Victor's gaze slid over it with practiced indifference. "Do you recognize him?" Alana asked. Victor didn't even pretend to look. No. Alana didn't push. Pushing gives them something to push against. Instead, she placed a third item on the table, a transcript of the widow's statement, the words Victor, cash, keep his mouth shut, ruin people's lives. Victor's mouth tightened. Not fear. Irritation. Like a fly had landed on his plate. People say a lot of things, he said. Alana leaned forward and lowered her voice. Someone came to her house last week, she said. 2 men. They threatened her daughter. Victor's eyes sharpened. Are you accusing me of that? I'm telling you, Alana said, that intimidation is what guilty people do when time runs out. Victor's jaw flexed once. You have no idea what you're doing, he said quietly, and there was a moment, brief, electric, when the calm cracked enough to show something underneath, something cold and contemptuous. Alana held his gaze. I know what you did with that earring, she said. Victor smiled then, small, controlled. You know nothing, he replied, and in his tone was a subtle correction, a reminder that knowledge and proof are not the same. The door opened behind them and Victor's lawyer finally arrived, a gust of tailored certainty, and the moment he sat Victor's posture eased, like he'd been waiting for his armor. The lawyer's voice filled the room, procedural, aggressive. Detective, my client will not be answering any further questions. He began to gather the folders. Alana let him. She didn't fight for paper. She fought for timing. As Victor stood, Alana said, almost casually, we're going to ask for familial DNA comparison. Victor paused. It was a small pause, just a hitch in movement, but it was real. His lawyer turned sharply. On what grounds? Alana shrugged lightly. We have shared markers between 2 pieces of evidence. If it's not your client, it could be a close relative. A brother. A cousin. A son. She watched Victor's face closely. Sometimes people inherit more than money. Victor's eyes went flat. I don't have family, he said, too quickly. The lawyer shot him a glance, annoyance, warning. Alana stored it like ammunition. She didn't press. She let them leave with that sentence hanging, because sentences like that are doors themselves, and sometimes the most important thing a suspect says, is the thing they didn't have to say. Back upstairs, Alana pulled Victor's background again, this time looking not for crimes but for absences. People without family are rare. People who claim they have none are rarer. She dug into birth records, old addresses, obituaries, the paper bones of a life. She found Victor's mother, deceased, buried in a small cemetery in Westchester. She found no father listed on the birth certificate. She found a marriage record for Victor's mother years later, to a man whose surname Victor never used. She found a child, male, born 2 years after Victor. A half-brother. The half-brother's name was Thomas Harlan. Thomas Harlan had a record. Not the kind that makes headlines. DUI. Disorderly conduct. A fight outside a bar in the 90s. The kind of record that puts you in the system just enough to leave fingerprints, just enough to get swabbed if you ever got booked for something bigger. Thomas had lived most of his life in Queens, worked maintenance jobs, moved apartments, lived ordinary. Ordinary is what scares you, because ordinary men can hide extraordinary acts. Alana ran Thomas's name through old phone directories and found something that made her stomach tighten. In 1987, Thomas Harlan lived within walking distance of West 4th Street. She didn't celebrate. She didn't even let herself breathe in relief. Proximity is not guilt. Family is not guilt. But the case now had a new axis, and it wasn't a polished midtown consultant with attorneys. It was a man who might not know how to carry his secrets as cleanly, a man who might have left a bigger trail, a man who might not have had Victor's control. Alana and her team approached Thomas carefully. They didn't barge in with accusations. They knocked on his apartment door in Queens on a Sunday afternoon, when the hallway smelled like old cooking oil and cheap incense. Thomas answered in sweatpants, face lined, eyes wary. He looked like a man interrupted in the middle of forgetting himself. "Thomas Harlan?" Alana asked. He nodded slowly. "Who's asking?" She showed her badge. His eyes flicked over it, then past her shoulder, scanning for cameras, neighbors, witnesses. "What's this about?" Alana kept it simple. "We're reopening an old case. We'd like to ask you some questions." Thomas's mouth tightened. "I don't talk to cops," he said, but his voice had no bite, only fatigue. "We're not here to arrest you," Alana said. "We're here to talk." Thomas snorted once, humorless. "That's what you always say." They asked him to come to the precinct. He refused. So Alana did what she could do legally. She talked to him right there in the hallway, in front of his neighbors' doors, where the risk of scene would keep him from exploding and the risk of shame might keep him from lying too boldly. She asked about his brother. Thomas blinked. "I don't have a brother," he said immediately, and Alana felt the echo of Victor's too quick denial like a mirrored reflex. "Victor Carraway," Alana said, and watched Thomas's pupils tighten. Thomas's voice went low. "Don't say that name here." Alana didn't move. "You know him," she said. Thomas swallowed. "I know of him," he corrected. He's not my family." Alana tilted her head slightly, letting him see she'd done her homework. "Your mother's name was Elaine," she said. "She had 2 sons. You and Victor." Thomas's face hardened. "You don't know anything about her," he snapped, and the sudden emotion made Alana's pulse kick. There it was, pain, resentment, history. The kind of history that breeds silence. Alana softened her voice. "We're investigating the murder of Lila Hartman," she said, and she let the name settle. Thomas's expression didn't change at first. Then, slowly, like a bruise surfacing, something dark moved behind his eyes. "That was long time ago," he murmured. "It was," Alana agreed. "And someone wrote a letter afterward. Someone licked an envelope. We have DNA." Thomas's throat bobbed. He stared at her badge like it had turned into an animal. "I don't know anything about that," he said, but his voice was thin. Alana watched him carefully. "We're asking for a voluntary DNA sample," she said. "A cheek swab. It can clear you." Thomas laughed, sharp, wrong. "Clear me from what?" he demanded, and his neighbor's television went silent behind a door down the hall as if someone had pressed an ear to wood. Alana held his gaze. "From being the person who touched that envelope," she said. "From being connected to the evidence that came from the killer." Thomas's face went pale. He licked his lips unconsciously, and Alana's mind seized on it with a vicious clarity: saliva, envelope, DNA, habit. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand as if he could erase it. "No," Thomas said. "No. I'm not doing that." Alana didn't press hard. She didn't argue. She nodded like she expected resistance, because resistance is useful. Resistance is a sign the door is locked, which means there's something behind it. When they left the building, Alana's partner exhaled slowly. "He's scared," he said. "Or angry," Alana replied. "Same thing," her partner muttered. They couldn't compel Thomas's DNA without a stronger legal basis. But they could do what they did with Eddie, collect discarded DNA. The problem was Thomas wasn't careful like Eddie. Thomas smoked. Thomas drank coffee from corner delis. Thomas tossed cigarette, butts on the sidewalk like he didn't care about anything. Men who don't care leave trails. Surveillance started the next day. A discreet tale. Long hours. Thomas walked to a bodega, bought cigarettes, leaned outside to smoke, flicking ash with a nervous rhythm. He went to a diner and drank coffee, left the cup on the table when he paid. The team moved fast, retrieved the cup, bagged it. He spat into the gutter once, annoyed at something. The team marked the spot, swabbed what they could, because desperation makes you do ugly things. The samples went to the lab. And while they waited, Alana couldn't stop thinking about the way Thomas had reacted to Victor's name, not with confusion, not with denial like a stranger, but with something like fear mixed with hatred, like Victor was a ghost that had lived in his house and never left. She thought about Victor's calm, Victor's clippings, Victor's velvet pouch. She thought about Eddie's whispered warning, he keeps things, and the phrase expanded in her mind until it meant not just objects, but people. Like Victor kept Thomas in an orbit of shame and silence, like Victor kept Miles Dietrich quiet with cash, kept Eddie quiet with threat, kept the widow quiet with men at her door. Then the lab called. Alana took the call in her office, door closed, palms sweating against her phone. The analyst's voice was careful, professional, and that carefulness was worse than excitement, because it meant the news was heavy. We have a comparison, the analyst said. The sample from the coffee cup, Thomas Harlan, shows strong consistency with the partial DNA profile